Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 young kids. I'm figuring this out as I go, but I'm here to talk to Bonnie, who has been writing and speaking on the subject for over a decade and has been homeschooling for 3 decades.
My name's Bonnie Landry, and I want to welcome you to season 2 of Make Joy Normal, homeschooling for everybody. And we want to thank you all, especially for your questions, your emails, your encouragement, and mostly for sharing this podcast with your friends and making it a success that we never imagined. I'm a homeschooling mom of 30 years. I'm a wife, a mom, a grandma. My kids are ages 14 to 33. I'm also a speaker, a writer, a blogger, and now I guess I'm a podcaster, and I'm an advocate of joy. So we appreciate you joining us here to have this podcast help you make joy normal. Hey, good evening.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Yes. The holidays are over. Christmas is over.
I know. Yeah. We took our tree down today, so it feels very over, you know, and my daughter walks in the living room and says, "Where's the tree?" Sorry about that.
I know we are not great Catholics, as my husband says, because we took our tree down a week ago. But that was in part because it was not drinking water anymore. So it was definitely dying.
Yeah, our tree was tinder dry for sure.
Yeah. And then
trying to keep it up till Epiphany. So
right, I know. But we get such a big tree, it takes up the kids' play space. And so, you know, after the excitement of Christmas wore off and they built all their Legos, it was kind of like, all right, it's time for them to have room to wrestle again.
Got it. Yeah. So. Yes. Okay. So we should just get back at it.
Yeah. So let's start the new year with talking about having babies and homeschooling.
Okay. Because I don't know about you, but we have had announcements of babies from so many people we know. It's like, okay, wow.
Right.
COVID babies.
That's right. I feel like in a year of COVID, though, it's kind of hard not to walk out with just a bunch of COVID babies coming.
I know. And I mean, the reality is that homeschooling families, you know, regardless of their philosophy, tend to be, you know, fecund families.
Yeah.
You know, we have more children on average than society at large. So yeah, so it's an important question, I think. Yeah. So there's, right. I think there's some specific questions around that, right?
Yes. Yeah. So let's just kind of talk about just the openness of bringing another child, knowing the chaos that's already there. You know, it's, right. I think some moms and dads kind of have a hard time really being ready when the house is just in chaos, right? I mean,
yeah. And I mean, life with little kids is, you know, chaotic, right? So,
right.
Just so you know, I'm just going to say this from the outset, you know, but in my baby having years, you know, we were always, you know, willing to have another baby, you know, and you know, sort of all in God's timing. We were just okay with that. And, you know, and so I remember hoping my babies actually tend to be spread quite far apart. Like I sort of, you know, on average about 3 years, which is, you know, by the time a baby was 1.5 years or 2 years old, I'd be thinking, oh, I just want to have another baby so badly. Right. And then when I got the positive pregnancy test, I would have this mixed reaction. You know, a part of me was thinking, oh, yay, a baby. And part of me would think, what have I done? What was I thinking? You know, and right. So, yeah, I think there's this, you know, this dualistic thing that's going on. And if we're consciously deciding to have a baby or be open to another baby, then, we're kind of, you know, thinking about that all the time, right? Like, is this stupid or is this awesome?
Right. Yeah. We have always we've been one of those families that have gone through the ebbs and flows of financial security, right? And our first was born when we did not have a lot of money. We lived in Southern California. By most people's standards, we should not have started a family when we did, you know, but here we are 10 years later, you know, we are homeowners, we are paying our bills just fine. Yeah. You know, and so there's the big part of me that's always like, you know, God will provide. Yeah. And we just have to have that kind of openness and willingness to kind of let the chips fall, right?
I know, and it's such a beautiful thing to think that way. It's learning how to think that way consistently is what's hard, because we have a bad day and we think, oh no, God's not providing,
Right.
or we're never going to make ends meet or whatever. But so thinking that way consistently is really the challenge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And my kids are spaced out. There's not really a definite spacing actually, because my older two are almost 3 years apart. My middle two are less than 2 years apart. And then my younger two are 2.5 years apart, so it's like kind of the plan that I wanted and kind of dreamed up was the 2 year spacing,
Right.
like almost exactly 2 years.
Yeah.
And that just didn't happen for us. And I think it's because God knew better what
Yeah.
we could handle. We have never lived near family. And so it's been kind of a challenge. Like my husband and I don't really get date nights out. I have a hard
Yeah.
time leaving my kids with even friends because I don't want to, like, I don't think my kids are a burden, but I know that handing off 4 kids to somebody who's not used to them is
Yeah.
a challenge, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Somebody who
there's a
doesn't love
lot of
them.
challenges.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's got to be hard.
Right.
And so many young women are in that situation now, right? That, they don't live near their family. And that's hard in and of itself.
Right. So it's a lot to take in and figuring out, are we ready, to
Mhm.
expand our family?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, I get a lot of questions from moms that, are maybe going from 1 to 2 that are just, what is it like having two? And, I kind of say 1 to 2 was tough, but 2 on is kind of a piece of cake.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember around the time I had my fourth, I remember listening to this woman who had 9 kids, and she said, oh, 1 to 2 is really hard. 2 to 3 is, not as hard. It's not too bad. 3 to 4, piece of cake. And from then on, and I think it's because you're walking through life, not, then this is what you do, right? And so your initial kids, it's a big steep learning curve, and then there's just kind of this acceptance and knowledge of this is what I do, this is what I'm doing right now, this is my season, and you roll with
Yeah.
it better, right? And you just, it just
Mhm.
is what it is. And I think that, almost everybody I know, that's, around the time they have their third, it's like just not a big deal anymore, and it's beautiful to
Right.
see that, right?
You figure out a groove.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is, I think like anything, like getting married or, having another child, or, should you switch jobs, is, there's no real right answer to that.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes us moms can get sort of baby fever before we're ready, right? Before really we're not necessarily in a place we're already longing, as soon as one's walking, we're already longing to have another baby, right? So we can sort of get baby fever. And so, I mean, I think more than feeling, okay, am I ready? We need to think we need to sort of think bigger picture, like what will another child add to our life? Of course, there's difficulties to consider, and stressors to consider, but ultimately, what will another child add to our life?
Mhm.
Um, would giving another sibling to my already the children I already have, be something that would be a good thing for them? Would it help them grow? Would it help them, become? And so I think that we maybe need to, because we're never really ready, right? We're
Mhm.
never really ready to be homeowners. We're never really ready to be married. You can't be, the same way that, if somebody said to you, how do you know when you're ready to have your first baby? You can't be ready, because so much of the readiness comes from just having the baby, right? And you can't really prepare yourself for that in any way. I mean, you can read books and talk to other people and all of that, but until it's your own child, you can't make the statement that you're ready, right? And anybody who says that, we would think, you don't hear people saying that, but anyone who says that, we think, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
And so I think that's with every child that you welcome into your home. You can't really be ready, right? Because
Right.
you don't know what it's like to be the mom of 3 or the mom of 5 or the mom of whatever it is, is next for you. So, um, how do we reframe the question? I'm not really sure. Um, can I, do I have support? How can I, if I don't have support, how can I get support?
Mhm.
What's it going to be like in those, very, tenuous first few weeks after bringing a baby home, when, all the kids are, feeling their oats, and I'm not at the top of my game physically and all of that. How am I going to manage that? So maybe
Mhm.
management is what we have to look at more than readiness,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know most people think financially right off the bat,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying, if you're struggling to make your bills, that's okay. Go ahead and, you know, grow your family. But I also hesitate to assume, when you feel like, oh, I could always be making more money, though. That's important. My
Yeah.
thought always goes to, but you could lose everything in a week. You
Yeah.
know, nothing
Yeah.
is really as
There could
secure
be a
as you
hurricane.
think.
There could, yeah, absolutely. Right. So nothing is certain in life. And there's a great
Mhm.
quote, actually. I'm not quite sure how it fits into this conversation, but I think it was Sheila Kitzinger, who's a birth writer. She said, birth is as safe as life gets.
Mhm.
Right. She's, an advocate of home birth and whatnot. And I thought, wow, that's, like, was it Gandalf who said to Frodo, it's dangerous business walking out your front door. It is, right? Having another baby and not having another baby are probably equally risky. you know? Um, and so, uh, is it imprudent? Yeah, sometimes, I mean, if we were just doing it from a financial perspective, nobody would ever have children, right? If we worried
Mhm.
about that, and yet the same things, like, oh, every child is going to cost you $100,000 or whatever, that's actually not true either.
Right.
And I think that families who have, lots of kids tend to be maybe a little more, they're the ones driving the secondhand cars and shopping at the thrift stores and, using the hand-me-downs and all of that. They're probably
Yeah.
using the world's resources a little more effectively.
Right.
you
Which
know
I have a funny story with that. My third son has, of course, all the hand-me-downs. But one thing I failed to consider is that I don't know if he's taller or maybe just longer legged. I don't know what it is. The clothes that fit his brothers at his age are too small on him. And
Interesting.
and so I keep just forgetting to, replace his wardrobe with clothes that actually fit. So I've started to do that recently, and he is getting so frustrated because he's thinking that the clothes don't fit him, the new ones, right? So like he'll have this nice sweater on for church that hits him just right at his hips, and he gets so mad because he thinks it's supposed to hit him at the top of his pants. And we've had so many tears the last several weeks going to church because he's thinking that he's in the wrong size clothes. And it's all my fault because I didn't put
Because
him
you
in the
bought him
right
new clothes.
size.
Yeah. Oh man, bad mom moment.
Right, right.
Oh,
Oh,
that's funny.
good.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely, I mean, lots of times we were, we handed down clothes to our kids. I had 3 girls in a row and then 3 boys in a row. So, it was nice to be able to sort of hand down like that. But I found with the boys, we could never hand down pants or dress shoes, like, because they would,
No.
yeah, they'd burn the knees out, and then
Yep.
they'd come home from church and they'd hop on their bikes and they would drag their toes,
Yep.
along. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess we can hand down the shirts and the sweaters and the jackets.
Right. I can't even do the shirts because my son wears through the elbows of his shirts, my oldest son.
Yeah,
So
boys are way harder on clothes in
oh,
general,
they
I would say.
are. It's crazy. Now,
Yeah.
I will say I still have the infant hand-me-downs, like up through probably a year, the boy clothes have lasted. But it's after they really start walking and crawling and
Yeah.
running around that
Yeah.
there's no hope.
So I was just thinking, if the answer to that question, if my answer to that question anyways, is more thinking more about management and of coping, in the sort of intense times of pregnancy and birth and having a new baby, if the answer to that is more lies in management, what are the questions then? What questions does that lead to? Like, how do I secure help? Right. One of those ways for me, for sure, I lived fairly close to my parents. And so I had some support, but I also, we had very differing ideas on discipline and whatnot. So I didn't necessarily feel like I could, ask for a lot, right? I just felt like we were just on two sides of a fence. And so, I didn't ask for a lot. If we visited my parents or hit, my in-laws, it was usually, they were really good people, but it was usually when I was with the kids, right? So I didn't feel like I was, getting help in that way. But so for me, I sort of reached out to homeschooling families that I knew in my neighborhood, who had older kids, and would ask for help, in that way, like, pay somebody to babysit. I might be home, but I would, pay somebody to come in and babysit 1 or 2 afternoons a week so that I, felt like I could go through that. When we had our, what baby it was, I guess our third baby, I knew a gal who was actually out of work at the time. She was an adult, like she was probably, 20 or 21, but she was out of work. And I said, would you be able to come in for a couple of weeks after Albert goes back to work? So he was home for 2 weeks. And then, she came in. I said, I can't pay you a lot, but I can pay you something, minimum wage kind of thing, or babysitting wages or whatever. But could you just come in and, kind of play with the kids and help pick up and whatnot for maybe 3 hours every afternoon for a couple of weeks. Right. And she was glad for the work. It was easy work, because I was home. So, I mean, that we those are maybe some tools for management. And I don't know, maybe you have some things to share too, that ways that you coped when you had a new baby.
Yeah, I'm pretty terrible in that I don't really ask for help.
Right.
I kind of,
it's a humbling thing.
Yeah, I kind of end up trying to grit my teeth and work my way through. And my husband's job offers a very good paternity leave. So, I mean, we've only had that for our youngest, who's now 2, but that was a blessing. My mom has also been able to come out right around due date time to be with the kids if, when I go into labor. But I really do have a hard time asking and accepting help. And I've got lots of people that are very generous in offering. But I have a hard time gauging whether or not it's, like truly offering, like, please call me if you need anything, or is it, I'm saying this to be nice, but I also hope you don't really take me up on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, probably not. They probably earnestly want to help. I wonder if one tool that we could employ would be like for somebody, because it is hard to ask for help, right? It's very, very humbling. And, but I wonder if we could create a list, of maybe, I don't know, 10 or a dozen things that would be really helpful, like take the kids to the park for an afternoon, or, bring a meal by or whatever, and just put things on a list. And if somebody says, hey, is there anything I can do to help? I really want to help out. If you could just take a snapshot and send them the list and say, if, absolutely, if there's anything on this list you could do, that would be terrific. If not, whatever works for you, but that way, because usually people don't know how to help. They want to be as helpful as possible. Right. I'll just share a story. My mother-in-law, came over while I was in the hospital when I had my second. My mother-in-law came over to my house, and bless her heart, she tidied up the house and whatnot, which was really sweet, while I was in the hospital for a couple of days. And but she, because she hadn't asked me, what can I do specifically, she took all the sheets off the bed and washed everything and put them back on the bed, which was lovely. But I had done it like 2 days before. And so it wouldn't have been something that was on my list, but I might have, had other things that, that I could have thought of or whatever, like, the floors are really horrible or whatever, and I felt like she kind of wasted her time. but how handy would that be, right? For somebody,
Yeah.
I mean, I would love that if somebody handed me a list of 10 things and I could just pick, oh, hey, yeah, I can do that.
Right.
That'd be
Right.
helpful.
Yeah. And I also want to circle back because I know I have friends that listen and I want to make sure they know that I know that they're sincere. I'm talking about other people
Yeah, yeah,
that maybe are more just kind of your passing candid friendships that will offer
yeah,
stuff and you do have to
yeah. Or
kind of
people you go to
wonder.
church with or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I do know my friends who are very sincere.
That's awesome. Yeah. So maybe that might be helpful. Was there other questions sort of around this topic?
Yeah. If we could kind of talk about maybe more on an emotional level, kind of the idea, kind of trying to homeschool. And I took this question to kind of mean homeschooling through maybe the insecurities of growing the family. I interpreted it as maybe, like those initial fears when you're first pregnant. I
Yeah.
know whenever I'm first pregnant, I go for weeks of being terrified of miscarriage, which I know is a lot of women's fears.
Yeah.
But those fears and insecurities kind of come across as anger, and also I kind of separate myself more from my other kids, and I know it's not a good thing to do and I try very hard not to, but
Yeah.
there are days where you just kind of help it. You can't help it, and I specifically fall into almost a depressive state of just like I
Right.
just have to sit and I just have to get through this,
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
don't know how many other women struggle similarly with that kind of stuff, but it can
For
make it really
sure.
hard to homeschool through that.
Yeah, and I think that, again, if we can get support, like if we can feel like, say there's a co-op that our kids go to, if we can get them there and maybe say, to the moms, if you normally stay or something like that, or help out, is just, for the next 6 or 8 weeks, can I just bow out, or can I just be there
Mhm,
but not really be involved? If we let the people around us know how we're feeling, right? I think that that
mhm.
really helps a lot, because of course they're going to say, oh no, for sure, yeah, and if you just want to drop your kids off, that's okay, right? We know this is temporary, this is not your normal, right?
Right.
um and also expressing that to our husbands. I mean, husbands, fortunately, if we have enough kids, our husbands sort of figure out at some point that pregnancy has its down times for many of us, and or they know how to respond, or hopefully they learn how to respond to what we're going through. Um, but if we can express that even to our kids as they get a little older, of
Mhm,
course little kids can't really understand it, but a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, if you can say, when I'm pregnant, my brain doesn't work the same way it does, and feel very, very tired, and just express it in terms that they can absorb.
right.
That if we can say that to them, that not that we expect them to sort of pull their weight or understand even, but that we
Mhm,
can at least express it, um, and then maybe we're going to be less likely to feel bad, or to bark at them, or to whatever, that they're just bringing them into the reality of the situation, right?
right.
And preparing them for it. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm first pregnant, there's usually a grace period for when morning sickness starts, and that was a really down time for me. I was just laying on the couch for 6 weeks. That the grace period being feeling not as bad, maybe
Mhm,
tired or whatever, and preparing the kids is, I'm going to start to feel sick, and that's a good thing. When I feel sick, it's a good thing, because it means
mhm.
my hormones are all working, and all that. But I might not be able to do the things that I did for a few weeks, right?
Right.
And and it will go away, and or preparing them for when the birth of the baby happens, or the late years. And I mean, the nice thing about the big part of pregnancy, when you're big and heavy, is that it's so obvious that you're
Right.
not yourself, right? It's the
Yeah.
early weeks, I think, that are hard. um but so I mean, if we can bring our kids into that conversation, I think that really helps a lot, right? And your
Yeah.
kids are getting old enough now too, you can sort of bring kids along. I mean, even when you had your daughter a couple years ago, probably your older two, or at least your oldest one, with you can kind of prepare them in a sense, right?
Yeah.
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 Um, I do agree with all that. I know that in the past I've, I'll tell my kids, they come to me, can you read me this book? And it's like, no, I really can't because I feel very nauseous right now,
Yeah.
and they'll ask, well, what does that mean? And I'd explain to them, I just feel, that feeling right before you need to get sick.
Yeah.
um, and they understand that. And so my son would, come to me, are you feeling nauseous right now? Or can you read a book? Just this
Oh,
very like,
that's
he,
very tender, right?
yeah,
Very tender.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's trying to gauge how I'm doing while also getting his needs met. And,
Yeah.
I really, that was great of him to do. And then
Amazing.
my other son, had gone through a phase where it was like the big bear hugs, right? And, I didn't want to not hug him. So I just told him, I said, we have to be gentle with mommy for a little while,
Yeah.
like, please still hug me, but just gentle hugs,
Yeah.
and kids do understand that little stuff. So,
Yeah, I think so. And also, I mean, I think a lot of our fears about, welcoming a new baby into the household is that, okay, whatever it is, I mean, maybe you sail through pregnancy and then have a hard time, after the baby's born, kind of adapting and whatever, or maybe you have a difficult beginning or difficult ending or both, or, whatever pregnancy sort of throws at you, or just adding to the general, chaos of family life. Um, but I think that a lot of times our fears is what about all the things that need to be checked off, right?
yeah,
And so, I mean, one of the things that we need to look at is maybe it's important to have less to check off, right?
yeah,
In terms of education, in terms of, so maybe we reduce down homeschooling to that, unless your kids are really independent with a topic, like if they're old enough that they do math on their own, or, whatever, there's things they study on their own, which for my, in my family has come really late, like more like high school age.
hmm,
Um, maybe we just read together, maybe we just listen to audiobooks, maybe dad takes over some of the reading when I'm feeling really sick, whatever, however we need to cope with that. um, but having less to do, right? And
yeah,
I think we've talked about this before, but the idea of making what matters kind of really small, right? And sometimes, if we're experiencing trauma of some sort, we've been in a car accident, we have a elderly parent who's very sick, we experience a loss of a loved one or whatever, we all everything falls away,
hmm,
right? And we know what really, really matters, right? Bare minimum.
hmm,
We go down to bare minimum. What matters is my people, right? And
right,
helping them get through this and helping myself get through this and, loving all the people through it. We have to think about pregnancy and a new baby in the same way, right? We
hmm,
just have to remove all the expectations from ourselves to do all the big things, right? And
yeah,
to just say, none of that matters right now. This
right,
is a season and it's short, right? It's short.
yeah,
So, we'll just be okay with what is, right? And maybe that
right,
means, the house is a disaster and all you have is you eat off paper plates or whatever it is you do, right? However you cope
yeah,
with that, you know.
yeah,
But we have to let all the scales fall away because these are big things in our lives. Like even people who have big families,
right,
6, 7, 8 kids, 9 kids more, you know, it's a very limited amount of your life that you're, actually having that early morning pregnant, that early morning sickness, the brand new newborn. It's only 6 weeks. Each of those things are only 6 weeks, and
right,
whatever. We just have to let go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I think also given this topic, we could also touch a little bit upon how, we as moms might feel, it doesn't matter how much we want another child, there is still a lot of things that I don't want to say we forget about, but I know one thing is given my athleticism with CrossFit, whenever I've been pregnant, having to scale back is so hard.
Yeah.
It's one thing to, go down in weight, but when you also have to watch your heart rate and, so you can't go hard and really get that cardio pump going,
Yeah.
there are things like that. And, for other women, it could be, not exercise related, but, maybe there's I don't know, a product that they like to use that they can't use for 9 months,
Yeah, or they can't have a glass of wine or whatever. Yeah,
Right,
most of us experience sacrifice at some level for sure.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So that's hard. And sometimes, so we have to go into it knowing, that just is. And again, I think the more kids you have, the more that becomes like, okay, well, it's a season, and, and it'll all be fine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine.
Right. Right. Then there is also to note that with pregnancy, because hormones are crazy, things like depression and anxiety can tend to get worse as well.
Yeah.
And again, that's a season. It's 9 months or less of going through that, but that it feels like an eternity when you're in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah. When I was pregnant, it was interesting because I'm very extroverted and like to be around a lot of people and like, a lot of change and things like that. And when I was pregnant, I didn't really want to see people, and I knew it was good for me. But it took me 2 or 3 pregnancies to realize that this is part of the reaction that I was having, that I didn't really want to be around people. And that actually kind of sucked me down a little further. So even though I was not, I sort of became non-extroverted, when I was pregnant, just for this period of time. And as soon as I wasn't pregnant anymore, it just went away. But I wouldn't say I felt depressed or anxious, even just not social, not wanting to be hanging out with people, not feeling, I don't know, just maybe energy a little low or something like that. And and yet I had to push myself a little bit to be around people sometimes because I knew it was really good for me. Otherwise I would sort of get into kind of a dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. With my third son, with his pregnancy, it was my worst anxiety ever. It was a place I'd never been before, and it just felt very isolating. And it was right after we had left California, so we weren't near any of our friends. And I remember I was in the doctor's office. Well, I had family that time, but they had their stuff that they, school and work, and I just remember it was like a week before my son was due, and I went in for the, my appointment, and I wasn't dilated at all. And I just broke down in tears, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. You have to induce me. And my doctor was kind of alarmed by that. And he goes, why? And I said, I have the worst anxiety ever. I can't even function. And he goes, well, that's a pretty good reason to induce you. You're well within, the okay time period. And so that was really rough. That was a rough delivery too. Just, nothing went wrong, but it was just when you're in that place, it's hard. But, then I had my
body and your mind weren't ready, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of easy to think that my next pregnancy would be the same. And it was my best pregnancy. My fourth was, I was so happy. It was my least anxious I've ever been, and I was back to being really social again. So that's kind of another thing to look at. Every pregnancy is different, so it might not be as bad as it was.
Yeah. And it might be worse. That's unfortunately, we just never quite know what we're getting into. But, back to the sort of original point we're making, you wake up every single morning not really knowing what you're getting yourself into, right? I think what makes welcoming another baby into kind of the already sort of, business of homeschooling and raising kids and all of that is that we're doing it consciously. Right. So it's not just like, okay, I woke up this morning and stepped on Lego, or I woke up this morning and the kids were vomiting. I woke up this morning and, my husband lost his job. It's something you're choosing, right? It's like, I don't know if you've ever had elective surgery, but the weird thing about elective surgery is that you're electing it, right? Like, you're there and, to get your surgery, you think, what was I thinking? Like, things are not that bad. I don't really need surgery here.
Right.
Where if you just have to have a surgery, well, that's different. You're not thinking those thoughts. But I think that, something this along the same lines. It's like, okay, this is just such a bad idea. Right. All the repercussions come, bouncing off your brain.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think it's with, having more kids, you're also you're losing a little bit of your control, right? And we as humans,
we have control, right?
right. But that's what we always
do. Yeah, you think you do.
Right. We want that control. We find ways to control, whether it's like cleaning, being on task to clean, or
Yeah.
scheduling. Those are our ways of controlling. And with pregnancy and the like, it's not in your control. And that's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess there's not any sort of clear-cut answer, but certainly lots to chew on about support and managing and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, I know I've said this before, but again, don't be having people in your life who are negative, right? If
Mhm.
you want to have another baby or you're having another baby and there's negative people, whatever, they can think whatever they want to think. But don't be around them if they're sucking the life out of you, right? You don't have to do that. Even if they're people, your parents or in-laws or whatever, you can make your weekly phone call or you can make your weekly, 20-minute drop in to visit or whatever. But you do not have to put yourself in the mouth of the lion, right? You're
Right.
not required to do that, you know, and those things just make you second guess all your concerns and fears that you had in the first place. So, you
Right.
know, it's okay. You can limit your social activity or your interaction with people who are negative about your life choices, whether it's homeschooling or having another baby or
Right.
whatever it is you've decided to do. And those things tend to come under fire quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that is particularly difficult, especially because people are not having as many kids as they once were, right? Both my parents come from a family of 6. My
Yeah.
husband's mom comes from a family of 12,
Wow.
but you don't hear
It was
about that.
normal. Yeah, it was just more normal, right?
Right, so we have one other family that has 5 kids that we are interacting with, on a regular basis. But other than that, it's a lot of families with 1 kid or maybe 2.
Yeah.
And so I personally just feel more under a magnifying glass, if we're to have
Right.
more, God willing, what's
Yeah.
that going to look like? How's that
Yeah.
going to feel to, you know, be under that magnifying glass even
Yeah.
more,
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, so I mean, I just think, and I know that sounds like a harsh thing to say, but you know, um, if people have a problem with the way you live, that's their problem, and you have to
Mhm.
let them work it out. And if it means requiring, um, you know, space so that you don't get sucked down, then you are, you have my permission to take that space.
Right. Right.
um, yeah. So do you think that's a wrap?
Yeah, I
All
do.
right. So please, we have a few topics on our roster, but if anybody wants to submit questions, please feel free to do so on Make Joy Normal or via Instagram or email on my website, whatever suits you best. And we will try and work them in with other questions as they come up. And yeah, so God bless everybody. Nice to be
Thank
back.
you. Yeah.
Okay, good night.
Bye.